Hello and welcome back to another Blender tutorial where we will be learning to rig this robot so that we can easily animate it. So what we're basically going to do is start with these claws right here. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and before we forget, add in a UV sphere and just go ahead and shade this smooth and scale it down to that about this size. That's looking good. You can change it later on, but I'm going to go ahead, go over the shading. I'm going to add a pretty simple material to this to make it look like a inflatable ball. And as you can see, we kind of have hard edges. I don't know if you can see that because of YouTube compression, but basically if you're seeing these hard edges, what you can do is just go into the subdivision and you can basically subdivide it, press apply, and now it's going to be much smoother. As you see, it's even more smooth. It's looking smooth even though it's shade flat, so I'm just going ahead and shade it back to smooth. If your computer can't handle higher poly models, then it's okay, you can just keep it low poly. But for now, we're just going to go on the base color and just give this kind of a yellow, or let's go with an orange color. I'm just going to go ahead and open this so I can see the preview. And I'm going to bring the left roughness up a tad and add a little bit of subsurf color. And what this is basically doing is basically allowing the light to kind of pass through it. So as you see, now it looks like the light is going to be passing through. Let me just go ahead and switch over to cycles, switch over to my GPU, and you can see the light is catching on the inside, whereas if I don't have any subsurf, it doesn't look like a ball, look a real ball. And you don't have to go all the way, maybe a little bit, because it's not going to be very like a very thick outer layer, but it's still going to probably have a kind of a thin layer allowing some light to pass through it. But yeah, you don't have to worry. It looks a little noisy now, but we'll get to that when we're going to render. So you can go back to this view right here. You can open up the preview if you want. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in a bump, and I'm just going to connect the normal to normal, and then I'm going to add in some noise and just connect the factor to the height. And as you see, now we have kind of this setup right here, so it looks very bumpy. I'm just going to, if you have the noise, sorry, not the noise, if you have uh, the shader, the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, you can press Control T to add in a mapping and texture coordinate node. However, if you don't have that, then just go mapping, add in the mapping, search for texture coordinate, and basically kind of have to generate it to the vector and the vector to scale. And now we can just scale this in, add a little detail. You can go crazy high detailed if you want. I'm going to bring the roughness up a fair bit, and I'm just going to actually bring the scale down so I can see this a little better. So with the roughness like this, we're going to get this kind of very glossy kind of effect, but with the roughness up, now it's going to kind of look like those inflatable in those inflatable balls. And you can just go ahead and add a color ramp if you want, and I'm just going to let that calculate, and you can actually pull this in to kind of make it so that some parts are showing, some parts aren't, because in reality, it might be kind of banged up on the surface, or maybe it's not going to have these everywhere, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it without a color ramp and just have it like this, and that's going to look pretty good. You can go ahead and go into cycles and view it, see how that looks. It looks pretty good, but yeah, it's still looking very noisy in the render because we aren't going to denoise it yet, but for now, this is good. This looks like an inflatable ball. So next what we're going to do is go over here, and I'm just going to set this rotation to 0. Also, this has some rotation. You can just go ahead and set that to 0. Not really going to make much of a difference. This right here, again, we have some weird rotation, don't know why, but I'm just going to set these to 0, and then we have this right here all set up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add in an empty, and I'm just going to add in a single arrow. Now this basically does absolutely nothing. I'm just going to scale it down like this. Press Shift X to scale it like this a little bit so it's easy to see, but this you're not going to see in your render. It's not going to do anything except you can actually parent objects to this. But we're not going to parent it. Actually, we're going to take this and parent to this right here. And the reason being is because we want this to follow the movement of this. But what we're going to do is actually add something called a driver. So basically, I want it so that whenever this moves forward or backwards, or in this case, this its own up and down, because this is actually its up and down, if you're looking at it from the direction the arrow's pointing. But of course we're not doing that because we're in the kind of the world view, so we move everything in the world view. However, if you just press an axis twice, you're going to move it on its own individual up down or left right or forward backwards axis basically. So we're going to add a driver so that whenever this moves forward or backwards, the claws are going to open and close. So I'm just going to rotate this, and it's basically going to be rotating around the Z. So I want to right click and add a driver. And now what this is going to do is I'm going to basically select the object. I want the empty. Now here's the confusing part. Well, first of all, if this is going to move, here we go, you see this is going to work. But the thing is, if this moves right here, this is actually technically moving in the world space, so the claws are going to actually open and close as the robot moves, and that's not what we want. So right click and edit the driver, and just go ahead and actually I'm going to change this expression right here. So instead of having var plus 0, basically var is like the movement, I want to kind of multiply it by maybe 2 so that it's more sensitive to this movement. Might need to multiply it by, turn that off, multiply it by 3. So now, there we go. It's a little easier. We don't have to move this as far. But what we're going to do is I'm going to set this to the Z location, and the space is going to be local space. So if this moves, this is not going to rotate. But if this moves on its own space, it should rotate. So if I move it up and down, it's going to rotate. But I want to move this forward and backward. So I just have to find what axis that's rotating on. And let's try the X. There we go. So now it works. Even if the robot is rotated like this, it's still going to work just perfectly. And that's obviously very helpful because you want to be able to move both of these at the exact same rate. since it's basically a robot, and that's what robots do if it's working correctly. So I'm just going to edit the driver, and just remember var multiplied by 3. That is our expression. So I'm just going to take this cylinder, and I'm going to add a driver, set it to the empty, and then var multiply by 3. And we did the X location, and we have to do the local space for this. So now we have this kind of, this is not what we want because obviously this is moving the same direction as this, and we want them to move opposite directions so that they close in or out. So what you got to do is just go ahead and add a negative symbol, and there we go. Now this can reach out and grab, reach out and grab. And we don't want to move this as far. We want to keep this kind of close. So I'm going to edit the driver and instead multiply it by 5 and see how does that work. So as you can see, this one is spinning much faster, and we want them to spin faster so that we don't have to move this quite as far. So I'm just going to kind of scale that out so that it fits right here, so we can open it up, close in, open up, close in, and have this as like the default. So if it's going to go grab the ball, you can open it up, and once it grabs the ball, it can close in. And now we're going to do a similar thing to the wheels. So basically, whenever this moves forward, we want the wheels to spin the correct amount of times. So that's going to be their y-axis. So I'm just going to add a driver, and I am going to set the object as the chassis, and it's going to be cross its X location over the local space. Yes, so even if it's rotated, it's still going to rotate how we want, except it's rotating backwards. But basically, if this were to go side to side, well, it's only ever going to go forward and backwards, basically. Because the reason why that wheel was still moving when it was going side to side like this was because technically with the rotation of the robot, it's technically kind of going forward, but that's not important. Basically, what's important is you get the expression and you set it to the chassis and you set it to local space. And now whenever the chassis moves, the wheel rotates. It doesn't have to be the right way. It just has to rotate for now. So I'm just going to go and add a plane. I'm just going to go to shading, new, and I'm just going to do an image texture. Sorry, no, I'm going to search checker texture, bring the color, bring up the scale a lot, and there we go. So now we can tell how we want the wheels to rotate. So I want to go here. The wheels are rotating the wrong way, so I need to make this negative. Now they're rotating the right way, but still not fast enough. So instead of adding, I'm actually going to multiply. Let's multiply by 5. And as you see, that looks very good. So now the wheels are rotating the correct speed. And you can fine tune it if you want. It's probably not going to be the exact same number depending on the size. But yeah, basically now what I want you to do is after you're done watching the video, go ahead and assign all of these the same driver. However, I do believe you can copy the driver, and then let's see if I can paste the driver. Yes, there we go. So just all you gotta do is just kind of copy and paste the driver. So I'm actually going to go ahead and show you how to do that. Because when it comes to this side, let's see what happens if we paste the driver. The wheels are going to rotate the wrong way. So we're going to edit this driver, and just get rid of that negative sign, copy this brand new driver, and paste it on these here. So paste the driver, and now all the wheels are going to rotate the correct way instead of you having to rotate them yourself. So now this technically is ready to animate because we have the wheels, we have this right here, but I don't want to go and search for this right here. So what you could do is go ahead, add in an empty, and then add in a cube, kind of push it out on the Y. You can go ahead and delete this ground, by the way. Shrink it on everything except the Y, and kind of move it in. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy the location here, paste that in here. The Y is going to be 0. Location, the Y is 0. Z space, so going to be different from this. Interesting. So apparently what you could do is what I did. For some reason these locations aren't working. It's probably not a bug. It's probably something, oops, it's something that I'm not doing right, because I copied this right here over to here, but it's not working. So yeah, don't worry about what I just did. Basically what you could do is actually, if you want, you could parent this to this right here, so that way whenever you're animating it's easier to kind of tell where this is. But I'm not going to do that because these are pretty big objects that you can easily get to. You can easily reach this, so we don't have to parent any empties to this to make it easier like we did here. But yeah, so we really don't need to go through the extra effort of going and parenting empties. I do that sometimes. Let's see if I can open this up here. This is a project I work on. So basically I do have it set so that you can basically, because I don't want to reach in and get this part right here, so instead for my character I made right here, I just go ahead and I just made these empty so it's easier to animate. But we don't have to do that here. This is all good. And if you couldn't see that, I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar with this recording software, but if you could, then awesome. But basically, yeah, we don't need to add any larger objects that you can't see during the render just for the sake of animating this, because this is already a pretty big and easy to reach thing. We don't have many things that need to be moved. Just basically these and some pivot points, but that's it. So in the next video, we're going to probably start texturing this, animating, and then we're just going to render in a later video, and that will be all, and you'll be ready to go off and work on your own projects. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching. Go ahead and save your file, and I'll see you in the next one.